After more than 4 decades, a 1980 case of a nurse in Florida was solved. 32-year-old Evelyn Marie Fisher-Bamforth was relaxing at her Miramar, Florida home after work on January 22, 1980, when an intruder broke in, intimately assaulted her, and ended her life. Evelyn lived with her husband and worked as a licensed psychiatric nurse. The authorities later suspected that a neighbor took her life, but they had no concrete evidence to tie the suspect to the crime. For more than 40 years, the case had gone frustratingly unsolved. In December 2022, due to advances in DNA technology, the authorities have made an arrest and have finally charged the neighbor with the crime. Tanya Roos, spokesperson for Miramar Police Department, said, "Due to advancements in DNA technology and the diligence and hard work of Detective Jonathan Zeller, Ronald Eugene Richards has been indicted for intimate battery and slaying. We are one step closer to obtain justice for Evelyn." 75-year-old Richards was in prison in Ohio after being convicted of an unrelated assault and attempted slaying. He was then charged with taking the life of Evelyn as well. The police believes that Richards, convicted of manslaughter in 1975 after ending the life of his girlfriend in Ohio, may have been a serial perpetrator with more victims potentially out there. According to the authorities, Richards lived 12 homes away from Evelyn at the time. They did not seem to know each other. The arrest is a welcome development for Evelyn's husband, John Bamforth, who has spent nearly 43 years mourning his slain wife. John said that he arrived home after work that fateful night to find police tape on his front door. John said, "And that is when I saw what I saw, which was furniture disturbed, cushions disturbed, and then I walked back to the bedroom. Half of the bed, at least, was soaked with blood." On April 8, 2024, a cold case that the Miramar police considered the oldest one in the city's history to be solved came to an end. Richards pleaded no contest and accepted a 12-year sentence. Defense attorney Gabe Ehrman said that Richards will serve his sentence in Ohio concurrently with a separate sentence he has been serving in that state. Had Richards been convicted at trial, he could have received a life sentence. John's voice cracked as he spoke about his wife while sniffling. His wife's demise, he said, changed the way he looked at life. He is no longer the trusting person he used to be. John said that he never got over the demise of his wife. He said, "You never have closure, as you can tell, but certainly justice for Evelyn is the most important thing." Detectives knocking on the door of a witness, saying to them, "Been waiting for you to come see me for 40 years, led to the solving of a cold case. In 1979, Alan Morgan ran a convenience store on a council estate in Linslade, Bedfordshire, England, with his wife, Carol. Less than 2 years later, on August 13, 1981, Alan phoned the police, confused and jumbled. After finding 36-year-old Carol deceased in the store, she was bludgeoned repeatedly with a heavy, sharp object. Alan returned home after being at the Odeon Cinema in Luton with his stepchildren, aged 14 and 12, at the time of the crime, during which 435 pounds in cash and some cigarettes were stolen. But that did not stop the rumors. Alan Morgan was suspected of having an affair. The officers spoke with Alan and the woman he was having an affair with, whose name is Margaret Spooner. The original investigation team had their concerns and suspicions, but Alan had a concrete alibi. People were surprised when Alan took his stepchildren to the cinema, as he was not particularly close to the children. The focus was then shifted instead on trying to identify a man seen running away from the shop, noted for his distinctive piggy nostrils. Even so, the gossip persisted, leading Alan to do a series of interviews with the media in a bid to clear his name. In one interview, he said, "I did not do it," and "How can I clear my name until the real perpetrator is caught?" One journalist he spoke to was the BBC Look East reporter John Kitty. Mr. Kitty said, "He was one of those people who quite liked, I think, being filmed, the celebrity of it, which was very strange. His whole demeanor to me was weird. He did not react in any way as you would expect a man whose wife had just been brutally slain to react. Allen admitted in the interview about being a bit of a womanizer, a comment Mr. Kitty, who found him arrogant, said was shocking. He did not need to share that with the public, but there was one thing that really stood out for Mr. Kitty. When I asked him, "How do you feel your wife's life has been ended?" I imagined him to burst into tears. He did not. He amazingly said, "I have lost business. I have lost money. Rather than I am devastated, my wife is deceased." I just could not believe what he was saying to me. Mr. Kitty said that he kept going with the interview as he wanted Allen to say something human, and he did not. It was a weird, strange reaction, which made me think perhaps he did do it. More than 80 officers were assigned to the investigation, chasing down leads out of a hot and cramped incident room in Leighton Buzzard, Bedfordshire. One of those lines of inquiry was a dark green estate car seen parked near the shop at the time of the crime. A month on from Carol's slaying, without any arrests, police even went as far as hiring the services of a forensic hypnotist in a bid to try to get more information out of witnesses. A local businessman put up a £5,000 reward for information, while detectives made use of Luton Town Football Club's new computerized scoreboard to appeal to 12,000 second division football fans. It was to no avail. The perpetrator was never caught, and people seemed to move on, despite police reviews of the case every 2 years. That was until 2018, almost 4 decades later, when Detective Superintendent Foster took over as the head of the Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, and Hertfordshire Cold Case Review Team. One of his first jobs was reading through the review of the case. He said, "The first question I asked the officer who wrote the review was, 'What did Alan Morgan say when he was arrested?' And it was at that point I discovered he had never been arrested. He saw enough to make the decision to revisit all witnesses." He said, "There was one witness in particular that when we knocked on their door, her first response was, 'I have been waiting for you to come see me for 40 years. Her name is Jane Bunting, who was then age 17, and for whom Margaret, Alan's mistress, acted as a mentor." Jane would later go on to tell a criminal trial that while at the former Dolphin pub in Leighton Buzzard, Alan asked her whether an ex-boyfriend would know anyone who could end the life of Carol. She said, "He would say, 'I hate Carol. I do not want to be married to her. I wish she would lose her life.' Would an accident not be nice?" The Morgans had spiraling debts in 1981, and Carol had made a will leaving everything to her husband. The shop also had a life insurance policy linked to it. Jane said that she did not mention this at a police interview at the time, as "Margaret asked me not to. I owed her, and I was loyal to her." By the time of this fresh investigation, the couple had married and settled down in Brighton. The police, who had about 6,000 documents to trawl through, arrested the pair 3 times and used the opportunity to secretly record conversations. In 2019, Margaret was heard to say, "Shush," indicating she thought they were being taped. Alan said, "I am sorry, and I do not want to say anything because they might have." In a letter Alan wrote to Margaret that same year, after they had been arrested, he said, "Trust works on both sides. If I did not trust you, you would not be here, and I would not." Detective Superintendent Foster, who came out of retirement to finish the case, said, "I do not think you need to be a police officer to listen to those recordings and think if you are innocent and have not done anything, why are you shushing each other and making comments like they might be recording us? If you have got nothing to hide, speak freely and openly." In 2023, the couple were charged and underwent a 2-month trial at Luton Crown Court. On July 29, 2024, 74-year-old Alan Morgan was found guilty of conspiring to slaying and received a life sentence with a minimum time of 21 years and 325 days to be served. The judge said the following while outlining how he found Alan to be wicked. "The brutality of the crime shocked all those who attended the scene. 75-year-old Margaret Morgan was found not guilty of the same charge. She made no comment to questions about her husband's conviction as she left court. Dean Morgan, Carol's son, told the jury it was a real shock in 2019 when the police said his step-parents had been arrested on suspicion of being involved in his mother's slaying. The 57-year-old said he last spoke to his stepfather in 2023 when he was charged. He said, "He told me it was all a mix-up, and I told him I had no idea about what happened. The argument became heated, and he put the phone down on me. We have not spoken since." The perpetrator who used an axe or machete to attack Carol has never been caught. Detective Superintendent Foster added, "In the absence of a confession, we may never know who carried out the physical act of ending the life of Carol. However, we will do all in our power to secure new evidence and bring them to justice." A baby was found deceased in a dumpster in Pennsylvania. The perpetrator was finally found 14 years later, thanks to DNA technology. On September 24, 2007, a baby girl was found deceased inside a large trash dumpster in the parking lot of the YMCA's former location on Queen Street in Pennsylvania. The baby had been wrapped in a blood-stained towel and several plastic bags and placed into a canvas bag along with the placenta and the umbilical cord. The Lancaster County Coroner's Office determined that the baby, who was approximately 36 weeks gestation, was born alive and passed away of complications of asphyxia. The baby was known as Baby Mary Ann. The Lancaster City Bureau of Police detectives conducted an in-depth investigation in the case through leads and tips from the public, press releases and requests for information, multiple subject interviews, and routine DNA checks for matches to the mother. Despite these efforts, the case went cold. 9 years later, Sergeant Randall Zook took over the case as lead investigator in 2016, when new DNA investigation techniques had become available. The DNA evidence collected in the case was submitted to Parabon Nanolabs. Baby Mary Ann's DNA was also uploaded into a public genetic genealogy database in November 2018, where the closest relation found to the victim was a second cousin. DNA helped solve the cold case by leading them to Tara Brazzle. She went by Tara Indrakozit at the time and worked at the YMCA. On July 1st, 2021, in an interview with the detectives, Brazzle, staying in Valparaiso, Indiana, admitted to being the mother of the baby and giving birth at her former residence in Ronks, Strasburg Township in Lancaster County. Brazzle stated that she knew she was pregnant, failed to seek any prenatal care, and did not provide medical care to the baby after giving birth before placing the baby in the YMCA dumpster several days later. She was not immediately arrested, as the investigators hoped to determine whether anyone assisted Brazzle in the crime or disposal of the baby. An arrest warrant was quickly obtained when the investigators learned that Brazzle boarded a plane to California the morning after speaking with the police. On July 7th, the San Jose Police Department arrested Brazzle at the airport after she disembarked the plane. She was then extradited to Pennsylvania. In May 2023, 46-year-old Tara Brazzle entered an Alford plea where she acknowledged the Commonwealth had sufficient evidence to convict her of third-degree slaying, but she did not specifically admit to the conduct. The agreement was made in consultation with Baby Mary Ann's father, who was present in the courtroom, and the Lancaster City Bureau of Police, which led the exhaustive investigation. Brazzle offered an apology in court by saying, "I will continue living with this for the rest of my life." Her defense attorney, Anthony Damiano, alluding to issues in his client's past, said that she was abused as a child by her Texas father. The plea is treated the same as a conviction. She was sentenced to 5.5 to 20 years in prison. First Assistant District Attorney Todd Brown said, "This resolution takes into account this triable issue of fact, while also bringing closure to many in both the civilian and law enforcement community who were affected by this event in 2007 and also holds the defendant accountable, albeit some 15 years later, for her actions that led to the end of her child. Brazzle must also pay $4,846.62 for special costs of prosecution regarding the DNA laboratory fees. Baby Marianne rests in a pink headstone that stands out in St. Anthony's Church Cemetery. Her funeral service attracted hundreds from the community. DNA genealogy testing led to a breakthrough in a decades-old cold case in Ohio. On May 6, 1999, a 33-year-old woman left her house to go for a walk in Cleveland, Ohio's Tremont neighborhood. When she returned home, a man surprised her inside, grabbed her, and hit her multiple times to the point where she lost consciousness. The perpetrator intimately assaulted the woman and fled the scene. The victim called the police and was taken to the hospital, where an assault kit was collected. Unfortunately, the perpetrator could not be identified, and the case went cold. In 2013, the CCPO assembled the Assault Kit Task Force to address leads from the testing of previously unsubmitted kits, primarily between 1993 to 2011. The victim's 1999 kit was tested by the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. The DNA did not initially produce any matches in the FBI's National DNA Database. The DNA profile was then indicted as John Doe number 133 to ensure that the statute of limitations did not run out. The DNA profile for John Doe number 133 was submitted to Gene by Gene, and DNA analysts and investigative genetic genealogists were able to connect John Doe number 133's DNA profile to Bart Mercurio. The investigators then found Mercurio's DNA and sent it to BCI to be tested. The tests confirmed that the DNA in the assault kit matched Mercurio's DNA. On July 9, 2021, 52-year-old Bart Mercurio was arrested as a result of the efforts of the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Office's Genetic Operations Linking DNA Unit. Mercurio said the following after pleading not guilty to the charges against him. "I did not do this. On my mom, my 3 sisters that raised me, this is so embarrassing. I absolutely did not do this." He was advised not to say anything further. The judge set bond at $50,000 and ordered Mercurio to remain in Cuyahoga and Lorain counties. On January 12, 2023, Mercurio pleaded guilty to 1 count of assault, 1 count of abduction, and 1 count of burglary. Mercurio was sentenced to 9 years in prison and will have to register as a sexually oriented offender. Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Michael O'Malley said, "Today's sentencing shows just how important the work of our Gold Unit is. Through their work and the work of our agency partners, after 23 years, we were able to bring this offender to justice and hopefully provide the victim with some long overdue closure." The family of a slaying victim finally got justice 16 years after the crime was committed. On June 30th, 2005, 40-year-old Andrew Lara Alvarez's naked, decomposing body was found by the police. They were responding to a 911 call at his home on Glen Avenue in Fresno, California. An autopsy revealed that he had been stabbed multiple times. The examination also uncovered DNA evidence under his fingernails, indicating he fought with his perpetrator. The Fresno police detectives quickly identified someone as a possible suspect after he was found driving Andrew's green Nissan Pathfinder. He was arrested, but when the police questioned the man, whose name is Joseph Preston Shepard, he told the detectives that he had borrowed the SUV from Andrew. When the detectives asked him to take a polygraph, he invoked his right to remain silent. Shepard was later released due to a lack of evidence. For years, Andrew's case remained unsolved. In 2014, that key piece of evidence resurfaced when the DNA that was taken from underneath Andrew's fingernails finally came back with a match. It was Joseph Shepard's. Legal analyst Tony Capazzi said that was not enough to convict someone with first-degree slaying. He said, "Is there something more than this DNA evidence under the fingernails? That in and of itself is not enough to convict anybody of anything. There has got to be something more to back up that evidence." Detective Bartlett Ledbetter found Shepard was in a Kern County prison on a domestic violence conviction. He interviewed Shepard on 2 separate occasions, and he ultimately confessed. Shepard told Ledbetter that he ended Andrew's life with a kitchen knife. In an affidavit, Shepard claimed that he became enraged when the decedent approached him in the nude and made unwanted advances toward him. He stayed with Andrew for a few days. Shepard's defense attorney, Curtis Sock, said that a relative repeatedly assaulted him as a child. He was diagnosed with PTSD in 2017. On July 13, 2021, a Fresno County jury convicted Shepard, finding him guilty of second-degree slaying. It may have taken 16 years, but the family of Andrew finally received justice in September with the sentencing of Shepard. 51-year-old Shepard was sent to prison for 31 years to life. Prosecutor Deborah Miller was pleased with the outcome. She said, "The defendant took the life of Andrew Alvarez with extreme violence and brutality. He continued to commit violent crimes after the slaying. His sentence of 31 years to life is fair and just. The Alvarez family finally has justice for Andrew after 16 long years." A man arrested for knife attacks in Pennsylvania was linked to a 2-decades-old cold case. In 2003, 30-year-old Rebecca Park went missing after going for a jog. Her body was found in a wooded area, buried under dirt leaves and rocks, in Fairmount Park in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She was a fourth-year medical student at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine from Olney, Maryland. There were 2 similar attacks where the victims could give the detectives information about the perpetrator's appearance. The police collected DNA evidence. They were able to use the DNA, the witnesses' accounts, and forensic genealogical data to compose images of the perpetrator and photos that were widely distributed over the years as the police kept on the case. He was described as a man with a medium build, standing 5'8", with scars on his chest, shoulder, and arm, possibly from burns or stab wounds, a dark complexion, black hair, thin mustache, and bushy eyebrows. The police also said that he spoke broken English. During the attacks, the suspect wore an earring on his left ear and fled on a purple, metallic 10-speed bike. During the attack in 2007, he wore a mesh sleeveless basketball shirt and shorts that were light blue with white stripes on the shorts and white edging on the shirt. He also wore a gold chain with a crucifix pendant. Despite all the efforts of the detectives, the case went cold. 2 decades later, on December 17, 2023, 46-year-old Elias Diaz was arrested for a string of assaults with a machete-type knife at Pennypack Park, also in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Diaz refused to provide his name when he was arrested, but he was identified through his fingerprints. Then, 2 days later, the police uncovered DNA from Diaz that determined that he was involved or a person of interest in Rebecca's slaying. On December 20th, the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office announced that Diaz was charged with slaying, assault, and multiple other counts in connection to the demise of Rebecca. The police knew that the same perpetrator attacked 2 other women in 2003 and a 25-year-old woman in 2007. Diaz then remained elusive until November 2023, when a string of slashings rattled Pennypack Park. The police believed that Diaz was living in an encampment in Pennypack Park before his arrest. Mike Chitwood Jr., a sheriff in Florida, headed up the investigation into the disappearance and slaying of Rebecca back in 2003. She was the second person the police said that Diaz attacked. Chitwood Jr. said, "I am so proud of the detectives. They never let up. They were always trying to do something with technology. Because as long as you have DNA, there is always a possibility that somewhere in the future, as the science becomes even greater, you are going to be able to go back to these cases and close them." He had all of these women one-on-one at his mercy. Well now, no mercy should be shown toward him. I hope this guy pays for what he did, the terror he put the community and these women through for the last 20 years. Interim Police Commissioner John Stanford Jr. had the following to say about retired Captain John Darby, who had just assumed command of the Special Victims Unit when the assaults began. This was important enough for him today to come back. These are the type of cases that haunt you until you are able to bring some closure to it. Darby echoed his words, saying, "Investigators will tell you. They go home. The last thing they think about before they go to bed at night. The first thing they think about when they wake up in the morning is cases like these."